Uh, Professor George Haddad,
Yes.
could you introduce yourself and tell what do you do in UNESCO?
First of all, I would like to say that I am an educator. I'm a university professor in mathematics, and not only a professor, because I think that when you are teaching at university level, you have to be in permanent contact with research. So I'm also a researcher in mathematics, or I was a researcher because now I'm working for UNESCO. So I'm a mathematician from the French School of Mathematics. I'm a professor at the Sorbonne University, and I am a former president of this university, the Sorbonne University. And now my privilege is to serve for UNESCO, which is the second institution which represents the direction of my life, you know, and the accomplishment of my life, universities and UNESCO, and all with some a universal dimension and a universal, how do we say, a universal mission to address about education, science, and culture. At UNESCO, initially, I was in charge of higher education, and since 2 years from now, I have launched, at the demand of the DG of UNESCO, Mrs. Irina Bokova, a new structure devoted to education, research, and foresight. So we are now revisiting education, not in a superficial way, but in a way which helps us to understand education from inside. You know, like genetics, a kind of genetics of education,
Yes.
and not to have only a photographic vision of education and superficial vision of education, but to understand the subtle components of education system, and to understand why education has to evolve and should evolve this way, and to understand why success stories are success stories and failures are failures. So we need to have a genetic approach of education, and this is what we try to do.
Wow, an amazing job, believe me.
It's amazing, it's passionating,
Yes,
and
I think
it's research.
And
this is my life. Huh?
And when you talk, I can feel the passion of what you do.
If I'm not passionate, I don't talk.
Yes.
If I am not passionate, I don't act.
That's the key.
If I am not passionate, I don't involve myself. And when I feel that passion is lowering, you know, diminishing, I stop. And I do something else. Trying to go from passions to passions, you know, and to be faithful to myself, you know, to myself, which means that my goal is, as I said, to be an educator, to transmit knowledge, to improve knowledge through research, and also to have the privilege, which is one of the best privileges in life, to be in contact with students and young people. This is for me the luck of my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, you're talking about this passion, and I wanted to ask you, many people today, they get educated, they're in education for motivation, like they want to do well in a test, they want to go here and that, they're motivated by their future position in job market. Do you think there are ways in which we can teach and build education that people want to learn out of passion and they want to do things in their life out of passion? And how we can instill it? What are the ways?
This is, for me, the fundamental question about education. And if we should put education, the question of education in questions, those are the questions. Why do we learn? Why? And why do we educate? What do we learn? And how do we learn? And the fourth important question is, how do we evaluate the acquisition of knowledge? And there are different levels of evaluation. So all this has always been my questioning about education, and always trying to transmit to my students not only education as a duty, but education as a passion. And we have to renew with education as a pleasure, a joy to learn. It's not to learn to get more powerful, to have a good job. Of course, you need to have a good job, etc. But you educate and you learn just to build your personality and to be in capacity to discuss, to dialogue, to exchange with the others. Without education, you have no capacity to communicate with the others. And I would like to come back to the 4 pillars of education from the Delors report. Learning to be. What does it mean today? Learning to be what today in the 21st century, where market is so important, economy, instantaneity is so important, you know, and you never give time to time. Donc learning to be. Learning to do. What does it mean? To do what? Is it only at professional level, or to do as a citizen, to act as a citizen in charge of different responsibilities, of creating and developing dialogue with others, but also to understand environmental issues and responsibilities. So it's not reduced only to the profession, especially when we know that we will change profession throughout life. We live longer today. We live longer, thanks God, thanks to medical and science improvement. So we will have to address different professional aspects of our life. So the most important is that we have to understand that education is not only for professionalization. It's a short-term aspect of education. And we'll come back about that. So learning to do, learning to know, and learning to learn, which is so important to have this ability to travel through the knowledge space dimension, and learning to live together. Learning to live together, it's a real challenge to live together. But to live together, you have to be, you have to do, and you have to know. And learning to live together is the accomplishment of all these issues. And I think this is a challenge of education today, that we have to reconsider education through these 4 pillars, and to understand how education will evolve to address all these issues. Of course, we need all aspects of education. Early childhood education is becoming more and more important today, because we know that the cognitive capacities develop between the age of 2 and 10. There is a place in the brain, and we know now between the age of 2 and 10, everything is set for the cognitive capacities. And then from that, you develop yourself, you improve, etc. So primary education, secondary education, technical and vocational education, and higher education. And now the real challenge of our education is lifelong education. And not only for professional purpose, not only for the market needs, but for personal and human capacities, you know, to be a citizen of this world. But of course, to be a good citizen, you need to have a good job, to make a good living. You know, I'm not only a virtual citizen, you know, thinking about abstraction, etc. We need to have a good life and to share. But something which is important, at Sorbonne recently we organized a meeting about le partage, the sharing. What is the thing that when you share, it increases naturally? The only thing that you can share, and you should share, and through your sharing, it increases knowledge. You can share a cake, it's not to share, you divide. I give you half of the cake, it's my pleasure to share with you the taste of and the pleasure of the cake. But I lose something when I share. If I share my time with you, I could do something else during this time. But I have a strong pleasure to do it. But if I share knowledge with you, I know that this knowledge will expand through you, through the others, you know. And this is why I said that being a teacher is a privilege and a real fundamental mission, because transmitting knowledge, sharing knowledge with the student, you accomplish a fundamental duty which will expand and help humanity to survive and to develop.
Okay, I have another question, and you are in contact with the students all the time and with this new generation of young people.
Yeah.
What are the challenges for this new generation when we talk about education, about research, with the UNESCO vision?
This is also an important question. What is my mission as a professor, a teacher, etc.? Of course, is to transmit knowledge. But more than that, is to transmit confidence. I want to try to give to all my students the confidence in themselves and in the life. Not to be completely restricted, you know, completely oppressed, you know, by the this materialistic society which is present everywhere at all levels, and to give them confidence and to give them what is the most important, the two pillars of humanism, desire and doubt. Desire to do, to accomplish, to go and to discover. Doubt, to be rational, because if you have only desire, it's danger. If you are only in doubt, you don't build something, you know. So desire and doubt as the driving force for creativity and rationality. And those are the real challenge of education, to promote creativity and rationality. Creativity in the sense of participating to this world, to development, to improve, to bring something new, and always trying to address this issue. And rationality, because we have to be critical to understand what we do and why we do it, and how we share, and how we address knowledge, challenges, you know, and education being the central dynamic for knowledge transmission and improvement. So I think desire and doubt through driving force for creativity and rationality. This is what I try to do, and to bring my passion, to be passionate. And you know, something which is for me so important when you teach, especially in my field, mathematics.
Yes, of course.
You have to be passionate.
Yes,
otherwise,
course,
the student finish to sleep during the lecture. So you have to make it alive, you know, living teaching. And mathematics is not only tools, methods, etc. It's, I would say, the quintessence of the human science. And remember that Galileo himself used to say that without mathematics, all sciences are like a blind walk in a dark labyrinth. We need mathematics. Even mathematics to solve problems, but also to imagine the world we cannot address today. Remember that Einstein himself, when he developed the theory of creativity, he had no experimental capacity to prove his theory, just through mathematics. And new geometries, Riemannian geometries, and Lobachevsky, Minkowski, different geometries which were not Euclidean. And people said, but it's a dream, it's poetry, it's not matter. Yes, but it was serving the purpose of science. And 20 and 30 years later, experiments gave reason to Einstein's theory. But he always said that without mathematics, he couldn't imagine the world as it is, and in a situation which was beyond human capacity to see it really. And this is where it's important to understand that education has this purpose to free the mentalities, to free the mind, and to give you all this capacity to be responsible, of course, but creative at the same time. So this is what I try to do, and we need passion. And I say that teaching, education, is a question of love. If you don't have love inside yourself, don't be an educator. If you don't have love for the student, for the young generation, and also for adults, which need for lifelong, don't be an educator. No, do something else. Be a manager, be a banker, be a political leader, etc. But even politics, you need love to be a good politician. Unfortunately, I'm not sure this is the case. And when I see all these teachers, you know, teaching just to make their living because they couldn't do something else, they are not passionate, sure. The salaries are so low, the social conditions are so low, the social status are so weak and so low. Of course, it's you need to be passionate to do this work. So I think we have now to help politicians to have the courage to reconsider the teaching profession, the teacher status, and to promote this and to increase even the salaries. We have to be materialistic too, to increase the salaries, to increase also the evaluation of teachers through quality, competence, relevance, etc., but also to renew the teaching profession as the pillar of human societies. And teachers are much more important today than they were yesterday. And they will be more important tomorrow. Why? Because now we have this capacity to get knowledge from all parts of technical and communication tools, you know, ICTs, internet, Google, etc., offer you a lot of capacities. But what kind of knowledge? So you need to be conducted to address this and not to be passive receiver of knowledge, but active receiver of knowledge. And to have the capacity to say, this is not good, I reject. This is good, and to choose, not to be passive consumers of knowledge.
Yes.
And this is where teachers are so important, because they are more than teachers, they are tutors. They conduct you to this capacity to have a critical, positive critical capacity to address the knowledge adventure of your personality throughout life. You know. So it's so important to rethink. And when I speak to ministers and I say you have to increase the status of teachers, they say, okay, we understand. But if we do it, we have to do it for other professions. Of course. But sometimes you have to make a choice. And politics is to make the good choice and to have the capacity. Of course, nurses, medical staff are so important too. But I think that we have to start from the beginning. And the beginning is capacity to educate and to help each one to grow. And then nurses, engineers, medical specialists, whatever, will come through this initiative. So I think we need courage, we need capacity to sometimes to go beyond the short-term political dimension. And this is again one of the fundamental issues in education. We have to address the three-dimensional perspective. The short-term, because we have the immediate needs to address, and we have some capacity to address it. The medium-term, to rethink the organizational structure of education, teaching, the curriculum development, quality in education, the way we teach, etc. And the long term, which is the most important, to address the structural mentalities.
Well, I want to ask the last question, and it's,
yes.
I'm from Colombia, and you told me you're being in Cartagena.
Yes.
So, what do you think about what are the results? What will the results about the summit in Cartagena, or the meeting do you have in Cartagena? What do you think about what it is?
It's difficult to answer specifically for Colombia, because I think that the question about Colombia is the same everywhere, with different levels and different considerations. But I think that education is everywhere a challenge. And I think that, of course, developing countries have to be considered specifically. But look at developed countries. It's a disaster what education has come. Look at in the United States, what public education has become. Even universities, we speak of, we mention US universities as the model. But there are in the United States more than 4,000 higher education institutions. Among them, only 10% deserve this excellence label. And I can tell you, now education is a challenge everywhere and for everyone. So I cannot say for Colombia this, or for Chile this, or for Poland this, or for France this, and etc. But we have to try to create a real solidarity and cooperation. Because education is becoming more and more a global challenge. This is one of the tensions for education, from the local to the global. Of course, you have to address local purposes, and the needs at national level, etc. But now we are more and more considering ourselves as citizens of the world. And even in Colombia, when you train an engineer, a Colombian engineer, it's not only to work in Colombia. He or she will have to travel all over the world, and to make a universal dimension, to give a universal dimension to his work. So for Colombia, I would say it's a new country. It's not as old as France, Poland, etc. But I think that you have all this capacity, and you belong to a region which is so impressive for the future. And Latin America represents for me one of the most important regions for its energy and its capacities to promote something new and to adapt tradition and modernity. because you are young, but you have also strong traditions,
Yes.
cultural tradition,
Absolutely.
ancestral tradition,
Yeah.
and you are now bound for modernity. And Latin America, I think, will bring in this 21st century a strong message to humanity. I think it's one of the most important regions. All regions are important, but this region is important in the sense that it could be conceived as a laboratory for modernity and for the future.
Thank you
This
very
is what I
much
can
for
say,
your
sorry.
time and for these
Thank you.
inspiring words.